Hello Fleet, and welcome back to another episode of Know Your Ship with me, Chase. Before I get into the actual episode today, however, just a few things on my mind. I apologize for not pushing out episodes as quickly as I would like. These days I can do roughly about an episode a week since I have to work to make sure that all the bills are paid. So here's a cute apologies, bunny. I'm so sorry. Anyways, onto another piece of news. My thoughts are with those in France who've had to endure a very horrific terrorist attack in the past week in Paris. Vive la France! And finally, for those of you who didn't make it into the last beta weekend, from what I've heard so far, there should be another one coming in the next week or two. Now, back to our actual episode. Today I'll be telling you the story of the very famous British carrier, the HMS Ark Royal. She was commissioned on December the 16th of 1938 and served until November the 13th of 1941. She was 800 feet or 240 meters long, displaced 28,000 tons fully loaded, was capable of 31 knots, and could carry 60 aircraft. The Ark Royal was involved in some of the most famous naval operations of the Second World War. She took part in the sinking of the French fleet at Mers-el-Kébir. The Ark Royal played a crucial role in keeping Malta in Allied hands, and she's probably most famous for being the carrier that stopped the German battleship Bismarck. Sadly, on November the 13th of 1941, the Ark Royal was torpedoed by the German submarine the U-81 and was subsequently sunk. From what we know so far, though, the Ark Royal should appear as a British Tier 7 carrier in World of Warships. Alright folks, time to sit back, relax, and enjoy the story of the HMS Ark Royal.
In 1916, the USS North Carolina has a huge drawback as an aircraft carrier. She has nowhere for her planes to land. She must use planes that can land on water, but these must be winched back on board every time they fly. Hardly practical for a ship of war. Landing planes on the ship itself requires a long deck and a ship big enough to accommodate it. The 28,000-ton HMS Ark Royal. In August 1917, Royal Navy pilot Edwin Dunning attempts the first landing on a moving ship. The obstacles he must negotiate include the ship's central bridge and funnel, known as the superstructure. In a truly audacious move, Commander Dunning swoops sideways in front of them and lands on the front deck. 5 days later, he tries again. But as he touches down, the engine stalls and he loses control of the plane. The deck crew try to grab the powerless aircraft, but strong winds blow it over the side. Dunning is knocked unconscious and drowns in his cockpit. Commander Edwin Dunning proves that a deck landing is possible, but he pays the ultimate price. Making the deck safe for landing requires redesigning the ship's superstructure, the obstacle that had blighted Dunning's approach.
One proposed solution was to split the superstructure into two parts, moving them either side of the flight deck.
But the gap between the two blocks is hardly wide enough to allow a plane to land, and naval architects fear this will unnerve their pilots. They consider removing one of the blocks. Not such a good idea. So naval architects search for a way to offset the weight of the block they now call the island, to correct the ship's balance. They fill the port fuel tanks to the brim whilst only partially filling the tanks on the starboard side. But as she begins to run out of fuel, the ship starts to list again. Then they try moving the entire hangar to port, leaving behind an empty space. But the crew soon fills the void with equipment, and the ship regains its starboard list. Finally, they decide to physically extend the hull outward on the port side and shift the heavy machinery to balance the boat. After 2 decades of trial and error, they now have a truly revolutionary design. HMS Ark Royal is launched, in 1937. The Ark Royal is the mother of all modern carriers. Her island sits on her starboard side, allowing a long, clear flight deck. Her layout sets the template for every carrier to come.
The Ark Royal was launched on Merseyside in 1937. This Ark Royal was a brand new type of fighting machine. She was the first modern aircraft carrier, and she would carry 60 aircraft and a crew of more than 1,200 young men. Bill Morrison, at 17, had only just joined the Navy when he first saw the Ark.
It was enormous, and quite honestly, I didn't know which was the front or the rear.
Ron Jordan was 18 when he went to sea.
God, the size of this place. Oh, I wondered how it could float.
Bert Arnell, an air mechanic, had served on other ships before joining the Ark.
We had our own bathroom, and there was hot and cold water 24 hours a day, which we'd never had on the other two ships.
And pilot John Moffat was only 19 years old when he joined the crew of the new Ark Royal.
This is a huge ship. I'd never been to sea in my life before. The Ark Royal was my first ship to serve on.
The young men who joined the Ark were proud to serve on her.
The aircraft carrier Ark Royal, with her full-length flight deck, entirely overlapping both the stem and the stern, giving the ship a very closed-in appearance. Here she is again. Note that full-length flight deck and the single funnel carried to starboard and the light tripod mast.
In May 1940, Germany invaded Norway. It used its huge modern air force and its navy, spearheaded by the battleship Scharnhorst. The Scharnhorst was moored in Trondheim when the Ark Royal sent in its fleet of dive bombers called Skuas. "15 planes from 2 squadrons were sent from the Ark Royal to bomb the German battleship.
To get 2 squadrons ranged all together, it was exceptional. And seeing the different pilots' faces up on the front, and they were all ready to go, really. They thought that with the numbers that were going, that they would be able to achieve something. It was quite something. It was when all the planes had left the flight deck, and all of a sudden it was all quiet, and then we'd got to wait and see.
Ron Skinner, who served on the bridge of the Ark Royal, remembers the fateful attack on the battleship Scharnhorst.
I get highly emotional about this because my job was a silly little job on board, but I had to write the names and the crews on the board on the flight deck, tick them off when they went off, and more tragically, tick them off as they came back. I ticked off 15 and ticked back only 7. So, you know, this was something, the whole ship, we called it a Black Thursday. It was the 13th of June, 1940.
The Ark Royal may have been the wonder of the age, but many of the planes that flew from her deck were desperately poor. 19-year-old George Baldwin had flown the Skua in combat, and he knew its limitations.
It was a modern aircraft where the modernisation hadn't been completed. The performance of the aircraft was inadequate.
As Baldwin discovered when he flew skewers against the German Messerschmitt Me-109, that plane was fast and deadly.
I was absolutely gobsmacked when I came round the corner, and there were two Messerschmitts hacking away at all my chums, and they shot down 4 of them. And so I went down very, very low straight away, and I said to my air gunner, "No, you watch out, because if one of the Me-109 sees us getting away, he'll come after us." And to my horror, we only just got down to 0 feet. He said, "There's a Messerschmitt following me now. I'm going to fly head on straight at the rocks in the island and try and frighten the man away, because otherwise he's going to kill me, and there's no doubt about it." He got within about 1,000 yards, I think. At that point, I do this blimey turn just short of the rock face to starboard, and my air gunner said, "He's left you." So I think that was the only time I was really frightened.
The Ark Royal skewer pilots paid the price for their obsolete aircraft. Of the 15 crews that set off to bomb the Scharnhorst, only 7 returned, and the battleship escaped. The remains of some of the Ark Royal pilots who died that day now lie in a graveyard near Trondheim.
I remember we all, in the mess, we auctioned items from the people who had got killed for the relatives, or wives and that, you say, and we all had a bit of a prayer and a bit of a get-together.
The attack on the Scharnhorst had been a tragic mistake. It seemed to some that aircraft carriers were not the decisive weapons that some people had predicted.
The Vichy government of defeated France was still a viable Mediterranean power, with forces positioned in Algeria, the Mediterranean coast of which formed part of metropolitan France, French Morocco and Tunisia, as well as the mandated territories of Syria and Lebanon. The French army in Africa was also well armed with modern weapons and fiercely loyal to the Vichy regime. By 1939, the French Navy under Admiral Darlan was the 4th largest in the world. It was very modern and professionally manned. After the fall of France, an ad hoc force called Force H under Admiral Somerville was put together at Gibraltar to fill the gap left by the French in the Western Mediterranean. A powerful force of 4 capital ships, it went some way to redress the balance. It consisted of Somerville's flagship, the battlecruiser Hood, the battleships Valiant and Resolution, the aircraft carrier Ark Royal, the light cruiser Arethusa, and 4 destroyers. Its principal task was to ensure that the French fleet did not fall into German hands. On the 3rd of July 1940, Force H attacked the French naval base at Mers-el-Kébir near Oran in Algeria. It was a gamble that risked bringing Vichy France back into the war on the side of the Axis. After prolonged negotiations, the French still refused to immobilize their powerful fleet of 2 battleships, 2 modern battlecruisers, 13 destroyers and 4 submarines. Somerville opened fire and followed this up with torpedo attacks from Swordfish from the Ark Royal. The battleship Britannia blew up with heavy loss of life. Torpedoes in a second attack crippled a second battleship, the French flagship Dunkirk, 3 days later. On the 5th of July, the battleship Richelieu was attacked and damaged in the port of Dakar by torpedo bombers from the aircraft carrier Hermes. These naval attacks created enormous tension between Britain and France's Vichy government. It confirmed in the Vichy mind the image of perfidious Albion, who had abandoned France at Dunkirk
and who now were prepared to strike and kill Frenchmen in pursuit of a war it believed Britain could not win. It was Churchill's signal to the world that despite all odds, Britain, although alone in Europe, would stop at nothing to win the war in the Mediterranean. This resolve made a positive and important impact on public opinion in the United States.
The Ark Royal steamed into Gibraltar in July 1940 and became part of a special group of ships called Force H.
The Force H time, the time of convoys to Malta from Gibraltar, I think was the outstanding one. I think if one thinks of the Ark, we think of Force H.
The forces of Nazi Germany had swept across Europe, but now Italy was also at war with Britain, and the Mediterranean became the only arena in which Britain could take the war to the enemy. Now the key to the Mediterranean is Malta, and you can see why. Look, it's right here in the middle. The British were clinging on to Malta, from where their submarines and aircraft were a thorn in the side for the Germans and the Italians. Lose Malta, and you risk losing the Battle of the Mediterranean.
The seas were fairly calm, and you'd see as far as the eye could see ships of one sort or another just steaming ahead for hour after hour.
The Ark Royal's planes defended the convoys taking food and arms to the besieged island of Malta. So the Ark Royal became the target of everything the German and Italian forces could throw at it. As an Ark Royal gunner, Les Asher's job was to defend the ship from enemy attack.
We were attracting the high-flying aircraft. You could hardly see them. Now, it's no use you firing all your ammunition up as high as all that. It was only when you were going to barrage firing you got more anxious.
As the convoys approached Malta, the attacks became even more ferocious, and the crew knew that they were fighting for their lives.
If anybody says I wasn't scared, they're lying. I was scared. Yeah, and so was everybody else. When they turned down, that's when the pom-poms all opened. That's when they opened up. Yeah.
The pom-pom could deal with it, but it was too close.
Could deal with the torpedoes coming in, torpedo man coming in, but you couldn't get any lower than that. If they got underneath the range of that one, they were in.
Deep in the engine room, John McCrow often had no idea what was going on above.
In the engine room, you could never really discern which was a near miss exploding near you, or if that was your own guns vibrating down the hull of the ship.
The Ark Royal gunners were excellent. There was no two roads about that. They were better than most.
Yeah.
That's why it lasted.
Yes, they were very good. They were very good.
It was a damn good crew, wasn't it?
Yes.
As a last desperate resort, the Ark Royal would even dodge out of the path of the bombs.
The bomb doors are open and the bombs are away. 5 degrees to starboard, sir.
It was very lucky, because any one of those high-level bombs could have hit us.
I think the Ark Royal was a lucky ship.
The Ark defended the convoys, but as well as defending, it could also attack. One of its main weapons was its fleet of swordfish aircraft. There were 36 swordfish on the Ark Royal. Despite looking like something from the First World War rather than the Second, the swordfish was a formidable weapon. It could carry torpedoes, mines and bombs for hundreds of miles.
The swordfish was one of the best aircraft I know. It did the job. That's the thing. You name it, it did it.
On the 18th of May 1941, the greatest threat to British control of the Atlantic put to sea. The Bismarck, the biggest and most heavily armed battleship in the German fleet. Just a week after steaming into the Atlantic in her very first engagement, she sank Britain's biggest battleship, the Hood. Recorded on this unique film is the terrible moment the Hood exploded. Only 3 sailors from a crew of over 1,400 survived.
We didn't have a ship, anything like that, in the British Navy. That was something. It was huge.
After sinking the Hood, the Bismarck was running for the safety of a French port. Only the Ark Royal could cut her off and save the reputation of the Royal Navy. In the early evening of the 26th of May, in a brutal gale, John Moffat and 14 other swordfish pilots took off to sink the Bismarck.
The carrier was like that, and the next minute the carrier was like that, pitching 55 feet, and the seas coming over the bows as well. The deck awash.
You left the deck in that condition?
That's right.
When John broke through the clouds, he found he was almost on top of the Bismarck.
All of a sudden, it was all hell let loose at 6,000 feet. Shells bursting all round about.
To launch a torpedo, John had to dive down to sea level and fly low and steadily straight at the Bismarck. It took immense skill and courage.
I tell you, I really was scared. It's coming at you like hail. And I couldn't understand the cover they were missing you. But the nearer I got, believe it or not, it was coming over the top of my main plane, zipping over. We were coming in, and I thought to myself, I'm just about in range now.
Right.
You see, but you've got just less than 2,000 yards, you see. And my observer was shouting at me, not yet, not yet. And I couldn't understand, what had he to do? Well, not yet, yeah, not yet. And he said, wait, not yet, wait, not yet. And I thought to myself, and I turned round just quickly to look, and there he was hanging over the side of the aeroplane, and I mean hanging, right out over the side. Yeah, right out over the side, head down. And then it dawned on me what he was after. You see, he made sure that my torpedo went into a trough, because if it hit the top of those big, huge waves, it would go anywhere.
Absolutely.
You see? So, and it was somebody said, now, let her go. And he went in, and he shouted to me, we've got a runner. And that's when I did a runner.
One of the torpedoes launched hit the Bismarck and struck the rudder. Unable to steer, she was easy prey for the pursuing ships of the British Navy as they closed in for the kill.
When these pictures were taken during the action, the Bismarck was nearing her end.
The next day, they pounded the Bismarck to a smoking hulk. Just over 100 sailors would survive from a crew of more than 2,000. One tiny plane from the Ark Royal had brought about the destruction of the Bismarck. From this point on, German raiders never again dared enter the Atlantic. It was an absolutely vital turning point in the war.
And we took off again in the morning at about 7 o'clock, and I flew over the deck, I bet not 20 feet off it. Poor thing. Really was in it, just belching black smoke on its side. Just like that.
So this was just after when she went over?
That's right, when she turned sideways.
It was the following day, wasn't it?
That's right, yeah. Following morning.
The Royal Navy had sunk the Bismarck on her very first mission.
The First Lord came aboard to congratulate the Royal Navy on their triumph. You can imagine the feelings of the ship's company at this moment.
This was the first chance we had of going out and having a crack at the Huns. We were all very glad that we hit a really good target.
I can't tell you what relish it was, with what relish we watched the destruction of this ship. We simply loved every moment of it.
But for others directly involved in the action, the feelings were more muted.
What was the feeling like on board when you knew you'd stopped her?
No jollifications or
just a day's work.
Went to the wardroom to get a drink and say, there by the grace of God.
But having said that, when the hood went,
that was right.
That's when the Bismarck was sunk. She couldn't get away. She had to be sunk.
Yes, but the chaps on board hadn't seen those chaps that we'd seen in the water.
Quite. Oh, yes.
Yeah. Don't forget. Hundreds of them with no chance. None at all. Terrible seas.
Well, here's an interesting piece of trivia for those of you who like this kind of stuff. Did you know that the Bismarck's cat Oscar actually survived the sinking of the Bismarck and was then picked up by the British destroyer the HMS Cossack? The Cossack herself, however, would be sunk a few months later, but Oscar would survive that sinking too. The cat was then taken aboard the HMS Ark Royal, which, as you know, sunk as well, but lo and behold, the cat survived that sinking as well. Finally, it was taken to the governor's offices in Gibraltar, where the cat was eventually sent back to the United Kingdom. The cat passed away in 1955.
By now, the Ark Royal was so famous that she became a movie star in her own right. This is Ships with Wings, a wartime propaganda film packed with adventure, romance, real-life footage from the Ark Royal, and of course, cutting-edge special effects.
I told you we'd be there.
The reality, of course, was that the Ark returned to duty in the Mediterranean, defending the convoys. The old skewer fighters had now been replaced by the slightly more up-to-date Fulmars. Val Bailey flew Fulmars and knew that they too had their limitations.
They were slow. 247 knots vertically downwards. Wouldn't go any further. Terminal velocity.
At the height of the battle, it was the Ark's Fulmar fighters that defended the convoys. The Fulmars shot down many enemy aircraft, but because of the Fulmar's limitations, not all of them returned. When on the 13th of November 1941, she was heading for the safety of her base. At 3:45 in the afternoon, German submarine U-81 fired 4 torpedoes at the giant British ship.
And the ship shook. It was unbelievable. A ship of that tonnage, it just sort of shook.
The decks whipped under your feet, they just seemed to whip under your feet.
Hello, hello, he said. That's a total lack of power. Couldn't work out what the hell had happened.
It whipped me up in the air, and I landed on my shoulder blades, and it knocked all the wind out of my lungs.
And the teacups and plates and whatnot that were on the table for afternoon tea were just crashing onto the floor. Some of them were breaking and whatnot. And the lights then went out.
Only one torpedo actually hit the Ark, and miraculously, only one sailor was killed. She was hit amidships, and part of the boiler room flooded. She immediately started listing to starboard. All power was lost, and an order was given to abandon ship. Val Bailey and another pilot managed to lower one of the Ark's lifeboats.
We sat there, this particular bed, and the commander appeared up on the flight deck, which is a long way up there, and he said, "What are you doing down there?" Percy said, "Load a boat, sir." And he said, "Don't be so stupid. Come back inboard."
The veterans confirm that most of the crew were ordered to go on board the decks of a destroyer, HMS Legion, that had come alongside. But despite the order to abandon ship, a skeleton crew remained to try and save the Ark Royal. She was powerless, taking on water. Deep in the bowels of the ship, the engine room was a hellhole, but John McCrow and the other engineers were making heroic efforts to restore power.
There was torches flashing around and whatnot, and a horrible smell of fuel oil, seawater.
But eventually they managed to start one of the boilers, and power to the pumps was restored.
We had 8 75-ton pumps, but once you got these going, they brought the ship back from a list of about 23 degrees around about 17. And it was holding it at that.
That night, the Ark Royal had been stabilised. The crew had managed to stop the flooding and even get the ship back onto something like an even keel. But up top, the salvage effort was a lot less impressive. 3 tugs had been sent out from Gibraltar to tow the ship to safety, but one of them had got the tow rope wrapped around her own propeller. Another one had got lost. The secret inquiry makes it clear that with only one of the Gibraltar tugs actually towing her, the Ark couldn't make any headway against the current, and she was drifting inexorably away from Gibraltar. Their only hope was to get the ship's own engines working to try and fight the current. The fateful decision was made. With a heroic effort, the crew managed to get one of the propellers turning, but the result was a disaster.
The additional thrust that had been put on started to weaken some more of the bulkheads. Some of the seams were starting to go. There was water spurting through bulkheads that had been weakened, so they were collapsing, and you were getting more an onrush of the sea coming in, and that's why she was going over so fast.
By 4:30 in the morning, after 14 hours of valiant efforts, it was obviously hopeless, and the last 2 men left the Ark as she began to sink.
Who was the last person off?
Me.
Really?
Yeah.
Gosh.
Launch went past. It said, "Ark Royal ahoy. Anybody on board, last call." And we said, perhaps it's time to go. And Guy and I were standing on the water's edge, and I pushed him and said, "Hooray, I'm the last man off."
By the time the Ark sank, the crew who'd been taken off the night before by the Legion was safe in Gibraltar, awaiting news.
We were completely convinced it would be saved, and even when we were on the jetty the following morning at Gibraltar, we were expecting to see the Ark appear. We were appalled when it didn't. We didn't think it was a death blow.
The ship that had steamed into the Atlantic to help sink the Bismarck, the ship that was defying the Axis air forces in the Mediterranean, was gone. Morale in Britain was bound to suffer. The captain was court-martialed, and the Navy set about mythologizing the Ark Royal itself. They published a booklet soon after. It characterized its loss as a heroic rescue attempt that had taken the ship close to Gibraltar and had nearly succeeded, but not quite. Now, of course, we know that's not entirely true. Thanks to a botched rescue mission, the Ark Royal, when she sank, was actually drifting away from Gibraltar. Despite all this, the story of the Ark remains a heroic one. Its name lives on in new ships, but this Ark Royal will always have a special place in the history of the Royal Navy and the history of Britain. The last official dive is over. The 5 former members of the Ark Royal's crew have had a unique glimpse into a relic from their past.
Perhaps I'm a silly old man, but it does tie me up very much at times. Sorry. I'm a fool with these things, but it does. When I look at that, it does really make me feel very sad, but wonderfully exhilarated to be here.
The crew of the Octopus have been so moved by the stories of the Ark Royal that they have arranged a special dive. Piloting the robot vehicle is much like flying a plane, so they want to give John Moffat the chance to relive his past.
If we get the opportunity and we're going up the flight deck, we'll never let you land it one more time, eh?
Well, now there we are. That's the thing.
If you rotate the joystick left and right, we get left and right. Okay, so try it. Laterally to the right. Okay, we're just above the flight deck. That's it, you're lined up. So push forward. Ooh. Yeah, you're doing it, John.
Okay.
That's it. Go ahead, go ahead, go ahead. That's you going on to the flight deck.
You're just skimming along.
And that's you on the flight deck.
God. Well, I know it.
What do you think of that, John?
Fabulous, absolutely. That is amazing. Fancy landing on the deck at about 2,000 feet down. I tell you, oh Lord, it's hard to be humble.
The last dive is over, and now, once again, the Ark will be left alone a kilometre below the surface of the Mediterranean.
And that's all, folks, for this episode on the HMS Ark Royal. I hope you enjoyed that. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel. I'm hoping to see you all on during the next beta weekend. Aside from that, take care, and I'll see you all on the high seas soon.